"Welcome to Ravenswood," the sign read as Rachel and her friends drove into town. Eager for a weekend of exploration and relaxation, Rachel, Tom, Lisa, and Jake, childhood friends united by wanderlust, entered the eerily quiet town. Known for its timeless aura, Ravenswood promised a mix of adventure and mystery. Unbeknownst to them as they laughed and reminisced, shadows lurked nearby, harboring secrets. This time they had chosen Ravenswood, a town that seemed to be forgotten by time. They arrived at an old, creaky cabin on the outskirts of the town, right next to the forest. The cabin, embraced by shadowy pines that danced in the gusty wind, seemed to whisper secrets of its own. As they settled in, an eerie sense of being observed crept over them. That stormy night, amidst the roar of thunder and streaks of lightning, they huddled by the fire, Jake, with a mischievous grin, to stir the air with a local legend. Ever heard of the whispering shadows? Venture into the woods at midnight and you might hear them, but beware, those who heed their call vanish without a trace. He teased with a theatrical tone. Lisa, unamused, scoffed at his theatrics. "Enough, Jake. Those are tales, kids." Yet Rachel's heart skipped as she looked towards the window. Her eyes narrowed, piercing through the relentless dark, half expecting to catch a glimpse of the unknown. For a moment she thought she saw something move between the trees. The next day the friends decided to explore the town. They meandered through its labyrinthine alleys, past decrepit structures and a quiet, desolate church. Each step seemed to draw the curious eyes of hidden watchers. At the local diner they met an elderly man with a wealth of tales about Ravenswood. His keen eyes sparkled oddly as he leaned in. "Beware the woods after dark," he cautioned. "The shadows speak, ensnaring the unwary." Tom chuckled, masking his unease. "It's just an old folklore, isn't it?" The man's response was a grave shake of his head. "Have vanished. Don't be the next." That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the friends returned to their cabin. They tried to forget the man's eerie warning, but it haunted their thoughts persistently. As dusk fell, they gathered outside, air fragrant with pre-rain freshness and a hint of distant thunder, a sense of foreboding. Rachel was distracted, haunted by shadowy figures she'd glimpsed the previous night. Impulsively, Jake proposed a walk in the woods, his smile failing to mask his own nervousness. "It might clear our heads," he joked weakly. Despite Lisa's obvious reluctance, curiosity won over, and she joined Tom and Rachel as they ventured forth with flashlights in hand, piercing the enveloping darkness. The forest around them seemed alive, trees towering like silent sentinels, their branches creating patterns on the leaf-strewn path. Each step took them deeper into an oppressive silence, amplifying their heartbeats in the stillness. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Suddenly they heard it. A faint, almost inaudible whispering like voices carried on the wind. They stopped, looking at each other with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. Jake nodded slowly, his face pale, the confidence he usually displayed nowhere to be seen. "It's just wind," he tried to reassure her, though his voice cracked, betraying his own fear. They hesitated, then pressed on, the eerie whispers intensifying, seeming to surround them with a chilling cadence. "It sounds like they're speaking to us," Lisa murmured, her eyes darting around nervously. The words were indecipherable, a strange mixture of sighs and syllables that danced on the breeze. Curiosity clawed at them, even as fear tried to hold them back. The whispers grew louder, clear enough now to discern an urgent tone, yet the language remained unknown. "We should really go back," Lisa repeated, her voice a notch higher. Ignoring her, they ventured further into the darkness, the woods enveloping them like a cold embrace. Suddenly, the whispers stopped as if silenced by an unseen command. An unnatural quiet fell over the forest, the silence itself seeming like a heavy cloak thrown over the night. Rachel's heart raced as she strained her eyes' dim light. "This doesn't feel right," she said under her breath. Jake, trying to muster his courage, replied, "Let's keep going, just a little farther." His attempt at bravado did little to mask the anxiety that quivered in his tone. As they walked, the oppressive silence was abruptly broken by a chilling gust that rustled the leaves in their bones. Out of nowhere, a shadow darted between the trees, swift and more substantial than any trick of the light. "Did you see that?" Rachel gasped, her hand trembling as she pointed. The others spun around, their flashlights slicing through the darkness, revealing nothing but the thick, unyielding forest. The air grew the night darker, and the unknown more frightening. "We need to leave, now," Tom said, his voice They started back, their pace quickening as the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Shadows flickered at the periphery of their vision, twisting along the path like dark tendrils reaching out. Rachel shivered as a cold sensation brushed her arm. With a sharp scream, she spun, finding only the enclosing darkness peppered with the echoes of whispers. "Run!" Jake yelled. Adrenaline surged, propelling them forward, their feet pounding against the forest floor. The woods around them seemed alive, branches snapping like the bones of the night. Each step was fraught with danger, roots threatened to trip them and unseen branches snagged at their clothing. Rachel dared not look behind, her imagination painting ghastly images among the shadows. Jake's hand gripped hers, his presence a mix of comfort and constant urgency. The snapping of twigs and the rustle of leaves kept their nerves on edge, a relentless reminder that something was always just a breath away. Their breaths came in harsh, ragged gasps, mingling with the chilling air as they dodged low-hanging limbs and leaped over knotted roots. The eerie chorus of whispers grew to a deafening roar, urging them to hasten their escape. Fear lent them speed, every sound magnifying their terror. Jake's face, a mask of fear and resolve, barely visible under the moon's scant light, spurred Rachel onward despite her fatigue. As they neared a clearing, the oppressive trees began to thin. A feint of hope appeared with the sight of a dim light piercing the darkness. It was their cabin. With one last burst of energy, they broke through the final brush, the nightmarish sounds behind them ceasing abruptly as they emerged into the open. They were drenched in sweat, hearts hammering against their chests in unison, relief washing over them in the safety of the clearing. But as they collapsed onto the porch, gasping for breath, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them out of the darkness. They were safe, or so they thought. Back in the cabin, they locked the doors and windows, trying to calm down. They sat in silence, the fear palpable in the air. "What were those things?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Shadows," Rachel replied softly. "Whispering shadows." Neither of them could shake the eerie feeling to their skin, the darkness outside feeling alive, almost watching. They huddled together on the creaky old sofa, trying in vain to feel safe. Lisa pulled a blanket over them, her eyes wide and alert. "Do you think they'll come back?" she murmured, her gaze fixed on the flickering shadows cast by the fireplace. Rachel didn't answer, her mind racing with the same worry. Every little sound seemed amplified, every crack of the wood, every rustle of the wind against the leaves. In an attempt to distract themselves, Rachel began recounting stories from brighter days, their childhood adventures that seemed so distant now. They tried to laugh, but their laughter was hollow, tainted by the enveloping darkness. They tried to sleep, arranged back-to-back for reassurance. The events of the night replayed in their minds like sinister lullabies. Rachel lay awake longest, staring at the wooden beams across the ceiling, the whispers caressing her ears, relentless and chilling. Without warning, a shadow loomed by the window, a grotesque distortion of a face pressed against the glass. "Rachel," it whispered, in a voice dredged from nightmares, not quite human, dripping with malice. She screamed, her voice tearing through the cabin, shattering the oppressive silence. The others woke in a frenzy, eyes wide in terror. Frantically they turned on every light, each bulb flickering too with hesitant luminescence. The shadow had vanished, the immediate threat gone. The whispers, however, remained, faint but persistent. The next morning they packed their bags and left Ravenswood, never looking back. As the sun rose, casting a pale light over the deserted town, an eerie silence hung over the group. No one dared to speak of the events that had unfolded the previous night, yet the fear was evident in their eyes. The memory of the whispering shadows lingered heavily in their minds as they hurried away. Each step they took was filled with urgency, a desperate attempt to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the cursed town. The road was long and the air grew chillier with each passing mile, yet no one suggested stopping. They knew they had to keep moving. Rachel's thoughts tumultuous. Even as the landscape changed, the shadowy figures haunted her. The whispers were low but clear, always murmuring just beyond the edge of perception. In the quiet moments of the journey, when the others seemed to be lost in their own thoughts, Rachel felt the whispers seeping into her mind. It was as if the shadows had infiltrated her consciousness, replaying their eerie chant. She shuddered, trying to focus on the world around her. The group's pace quickened as shadows lengthened, the sky turned a deep, foreboding gray. They passed abandoned cars, their windows dust-covered and interiors empty, which added to the surreal nature of their escape. With each, the weight of Ravenswood's dark past seemed to cling tighter, the whispering winds chasing them as if unwilling to let go. Years later, the memory of Ravenswood hadn't faded for Rachel. It was a constant shadow in her dreams, a place of whispered and lurking dark figures. These figures, always just out of sight, continued to whisper her name, a sinister calling that didn't diminish with time. They seemed to be waiting for something, or perhaps waiting for her. In the stillness of some nights, their voices seemed almost real, as if they were right outside her window, carried by the wind. If you ever visit Ravenswood, remember the whispers. Don't listen to them, don't follow them, and never, ever look back.